Leading Edge, good to have you guys along. Sometimes it seems the people in power prolong action. In other words, don't do their jobs long enough that we lose interest. Something else comes along, grabs our attention. Well, we are not doing that, as you know, on this show with the high stakes, high jinks going on in Columbus regarding our votes. Our votes, folks, are just too precious to get lost in one side or the other's lust for power. In Ohio, that too often means being drawn into districts in which you have absolutely no chance of winning. It's called gerrymandering. So to help us sort through in our ongoing saga, to help us sort through the latest on where we are in the, and I'll underscore this, constitutionally mandated redistricting effort, I welcome in from Columbus, Jen Miller, Executive Director of the League of Women Voters of Ohio. Good to see you. I know your roots are up here in Northwest Ohio, so everybody over from your hometown say, hey, Jen. Let's start with your organization, who officially then weighed in. You guys have been out in front for a long time on the fair districts thing, but weighed in officially this week on the latest congressional district maps. Now, folks, these are 15 districts, is what we have now, from which we elect members of the U.S. House of Representatives. And the league said what?
We said, once again, the Ohio Redistricting Commission failed to meet the Ohio Constitution, failed to create a congressional district plan that upholds the rights of every Ohio voter to have fair representation in Congress.
All right. And we're now playing all of this out against a ticking clock. I believe it was the U.S. Department of Defense has said no to delaying mailing of ballots to service members, which I believe we're up against a March deadline, maybe March 19th.
Well, so what the General Assembly did just yesterday is they said they're still going to mail the ballots out at the same time as the other absentee ballots. So it's supposed to be 45 days in advance. They're going to do it 30 days in advance and give military voters overseas an extra 10 days to return their ballots.
Legislature could also move Ohio's scheduled May 3rd primary. There doesn't seem to be much of an appetite on the part of lawmakers to do that, even though the maps, both congressional and, folks, the state legislative districts, that's the Ohio House, Ohio Senate, are being challenged in the Ohio Supreme Court.
Right. So the elections officials, voter advocates like the league have all asked for a later primary. The Ohio General Assembly could do that. Bottom line, right at this point, elections officials don't have what they need to redistrict voters. Voters actually, they need those final maps to put voters in the right districts. Candidates can't finalize their candidacy to get on the ballot. Voters can't do their education. There's a lot that needs to happen. And the best path forward would be to finally create maps that meet the Ohio constitutional requirements for fair districts and move this primary back so that we can have a safe, secure, well-run election for all.
All right. We've had state legislative maps rejected twice by the Ohio Supreme Court. The congressional maps have been tossed aside as not needed. Is one side in this, and let's face it, the Republicans have the majority, in fact, super majorities in both chambers. Are they stringing this out purposely? Are they running against the clock? Are they using the clock as an ally?
I think so. So what you have are the Ohio Redistricting Commission that has quite a few legislators on there, as well as the Ohio General Assembly that actually had the requirement to first work on congressional maps. They have dragged their feet along the entire time. They've missed deadlines. They've really kind of wasted a lot of time. And then at the same time, those same folks could change the primary. So they're saying the primary is coming. We just need to take one of these maps. Really what needs to happen is both. We need to have great maps that really serve the people of Ohio rather than the interests of political operatives. And we need more time for the primary.
Well, the last congressional map that I saw, and correct me, Jen, you're down there following this, living this, breathing this. It came out 10 Republican, 2 Democrat, 3 swing, totaling 15.
Right. And that's a concern because what we're trying to do is see parity, right? We want to see generally for Congress, 54% of votes in Ohio go towards Congress. So it should be about that many going towards Republican candidates. Here, once again, we see a drastically different scenario. But there's also just some clearly problematic areas where, for example, in central Ohio, you've taken very, very urban Columbus and mixed it with several counties almost to Dayton, rather than keeping central Ohio more alike. Something similar in southwestern Ohio. So it's both. Part of it is about, we look at partisan gerrymandering to show that, wow, mathematically, it shouldn't make sense that only getting this number of votes and you get so many more seats, right? But also just in terms of what the districts themselves look like. When you have these weirdly shaped, sprawling districts, it's very hard for lawmakers to fairly represent us because the economies can be different. The needs of the community members can be different when they're so sprawling.
Yeah. The challenge to the latest round of state House and state Senate districts seems to go, the argument kind of sounds like this, over partisan leaning districts. For example, when the Republican majority in the redistricting committee says, oh, well, those districts are Democratic leaning, they may be, but by the slimmest of margins possible, when the Republican leaning districts are pretty much comfortably so.
Yeah. And again, also that math. So, it's all about, if voters behaved exactly the same way this decade moving forward as they did the decade back, what would happen with those seats? And what we see is clearly that these were designed for a Republican slant. Now, if you're a Republican voter in the state of Ohio, you should still care, because what happens here when maps are rigged for one party, that those candidates play to party extremes and big donors. They don't have to listen to you as a voter. And ultimately, voters' voices have less power. Most Ohioans actually, vote a little bit Republican, a little bit Democrat. A lot of us think of ourselves as independent.
Yes.
We are particularly harmed by maps that are rigged for party outcome, because it really takes away the power of our votes and our voices.
Yeah. And for those of you who aren't clear on it, when Jen Miller, she's the executive director, by the way, League of Women Voters of Ohio, came up with that 54-46, that is based on, it's like, well, where do they come up with that? It's no. You came up with that, voters. We came up with that. That's the way we have voted statewide in this state for a decade or so. Therefore, if 46% of the voters are Democrat, why should 25% of their representatives be Democrat? And that's the argument. All right, last minute here, maybe seconds. Where do we go from here? Next thing to watch for.
Right. Let's see what the Ohio Supreme Court does. But in the meantime, no matter what the Ohio Supreme Court does, we need to push back this primary. So call your lawmakers and ask them to do that, so we can have a well-run primary here in Ohio, which is the right of every Ohioan.
Jen Miller, thanks so very much. And in her spare time, she's a jazz singer, folks. That's a different show. We'll do a different show on that. Good to see you, Jen. And we'll stay on top of this. Folks, we'll be right back on Leading Edge.